Okay, in this session, we are supposed to analyze a poem by John Dryden. So this is actually important to us in some ways. One point is that John Dryden is the greatest poet of the early decades of the 18th century. So he was a courtier in some sense, and he practiced, or he actually tried his hand at writing both poetry and drama. And of course, he was a very intelligent, translator too. So he was a versatile man, and his literary career is full of beautiful innovations and achievements. So the thing that we should know about it is that he was born in the early years of the 18th century. So he was as I told you, part of the period actually. He was born in 1631 and he died in 1700. So part of his life was spent in the course of the civil war in England, and it was in 1660 that the Restoration started in England, and it was a time that Charles II returned to the throne after the turbulent period in England. I mean the interregnum period alongside the civil war that continued to set the country on fire. So it was actually after these, devastating years and decades that England was expecting a condition of peace. So the 18th century actually starts sometimes we call it the long 18th century. When it is the long 18th century, it means that it has started in 1660, and that is the time of the Restoration, and continued to the end of the 18th century, and that is 1789 or 1798, sometimes depending on the revolution of France or the appearance of the lyrical ballads of Coleridge and Wordsworth, whose critical whose poetical writings began the era of Romanticism. So Samuel Johnson actually knows or introduces John Dryden as the founder of modern poetry. Johnson believes that before Dryden, the language of poetry was not a real one. So it was a language that was it was a language that did not include any common words, or the words that would be considered as the daily life words. Although this belief of Johnson is absolutely quite important to us, it is not the whole story of the poetry of John Dryden. So, well, according to the, so you can read maybe a wide range of informative, website or books online about the Restoration period and how the period was a revival of neoclassicism, actually, or just the predating era of Augustan period. So, but to recognize the position of Dryden, I think we should refer to some of the contemporary writings or historical accounts of English literature. So the most important historical collection or volume actually of English literature that would just define the borders of periods of England is the work of the Lives of English Poets. In that work, that was written by Samuel Johnson, he believes that the wit and talent of Dryden were much more than Alexander Pope. So, however, he believes that the writings of Dryden are written or were written hastily because his familial and his maybe political conditions did not allow him to revise his writings. This is, I think, from the point of view of aesthetics and stylistics, a flaw for Dryden's writings. However, as I told you, he was a neoclassical writer, and he would believe in the hierarchy of the universe, which is God, angels, human being, and animals, of course, and trees and other things. So he is actually a classical. He has a classical mind that would, preoccupy him with the question of existence on the one hand, and the religious, probably optimism for the better life of human being. He was interested in epic, and of course he wrote so many epic-like iambic pentameter poems, and the one that we want to focus on today is one of them. That is the Song for Saint Cecilia's Day. So you know that he was the author of Absalom and Achitophel. So that was an interpretation of the political victory of the Tory party, and it likens actually the story of Absalom's revolt against his father David, and many of these allegorical representations of the history of religion. I mean, like those in Judaism and in Christianity, could be found in Dryden's works. So, but you should be, of course, conscious about the impressions or maybe influences that he received from Lord Shaftesbury, the third Earl of Shaftesbury. So Shaftesbury, of course, has influenced John Dryden, in terms of his ironic and satirical tone, that could be, of course, seen in the works of Pope and Jonathan Swift too. But the most exploitation of such techniques and stylistic qualities were borrowed by John Dryden in many of his works. So, however, this could be seen in his Absalom and Achitophel too. So, the question, of course, is now about the song for Saint Cecilia's Day. So actually, um, John Dryden devoted two odes, like, well, songs or odes, uh, to the extolling of music. And he dedicated the poems to the London Music Society for, well, actually, the society had called the day 22nd of November as the Saint Cecilia's Day. And every year it was customary in England that there was a celebration for that day, just to commemorate Saint Cecilia, who was the supporter and patron of music. And on that occasion, the poets and musicians tried to pay tribute to the position and significance of Saint Cecilia. I mean, just as a sacred woman who was very much interested in music, and she was, as I said, a serious patron of music and musicians. And this poem, I mean, Saint Cecilia's Day, Song for Saint Cecilia's Day, is one of those two poems. And the other poem, of course, that he composed was Alexander's Feast, or The Power of Music. It was again a kind of ode that he composed in honor of Saint Cecilia's Day. Okay, so let's see how the poem is to entertain us. Yeah, just wait for some seconds. Okay, so a song for Saint Cecilia's Day. Actually, the exact date of the composition is not known, but it is suggested that it was composed in 1687, still in the reign of Charles II. Or sorry, it is William of Orange and married Mary Stuart. So, yes, from Harmony, from Heavenly Harmony, Miss Hudana. Yes, join the session via Firefox.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is my voice clear?
It is clear.
Sorry, the same problem happened. Um, shall I read the poem first?
Yes, please read the first stanza.
Okay. A song for Saint Cecilia's Day. From harmony, from heavenly harmony, this universal frame began. When nature underneath a heb of jarring atoms lay, and could not leave her head. The tuneful voice was heard from high. Arise, ye more than dead, then cold and hot and moist and dry, in order to their stations slip, and music's power obey, from harmony, from heavenly harmony, this universal frame began, from harmony to harmony, through all the compass of the notes it ran, the diapason closing full in man. About this poem, actually, when I read it, it's real beautiful, and it speaks about a kind of relation between the God's creation and also the creation of a music group, and it describes the involvements of music in both the making of the universe and the human emotions. When actually I start from the first lines, and I also translated this poem for myself to Persian. I don't know if it's good or not, my translation, but it became more understandable. It speaks that when nature underneath a heap of jarring atoms lay, and could not leave her head. Here we have the personification of nature, and here the poet is talking about the nature as something that is under these atoms, and it's just beginning to be created, and then it cannot put her head up. And then we have this line that says, "Arise, ye more than dead," in which it is a kind of command from our Lord or from God. Here we have these elements of heaven and things that are from God, or the same sentences, and then it is describing that all these atoms and all these things are, for me, they are like the members, maybe the members of a choir group, that they are at first, they don't have any discipline, they are in a kind of chaos, and then they become into an ordered line that is the compass of notes. The notes here, maybe the notes of the music and the scale of being of human. And then here the God is as the first musician, that whose tuneful voice changes this chaos. And then here we have the analogy, the traditional one, between the musical harmony and the God's creation. Then we can see that here the poem Dryden is very beautifully described these musical things in the first stanza. When we look at the all lines of first stanza, we see that at first we don't have, there is absence of rhyme in the first 6 lines. That this absence actually represents that chaos that we were speaking about. And then we go with the second stanza, but here something that came to my mind is a kind of a physical experiment with the the iron fillings that they round around the compass like a field of harmony when the compass comes, or when this order of God comes there, and this field just draws some lines of very beautiful shape, which this can resemble. I remember we had this experiment at the school, and it reminds me of that, which this shows the harmony in nature, actually, that all these atoms and particles can be a simile for members of a choir group that are standing around their leader. And that's it.
Okay, yes, actually the starting stanza of the poem is a very delicate illustration of the creation of the universe. And he believes that in the beginning it was just music that gave order to the jarring, as it says, atoms of the universe to come together in order to produce, I mean, the universe and Earth. So for him, it was the power of music that could only, convene these opposing forces under the canopy of one unified creation, and that is the creation of the earth and creation of the universe in general. So from heavenly harmony, this universal frame began when nature underneath a heap of jarring atoms lay and could not heave her head. The tuneful voice was heard from high. Arise, your more than dead, the cold, the hot, the moist, the dry, in order to other stations sleep. So this other stations means actually the unification. And music power obey. So it means it was the decree or the order of music as a force that caused these opposing elements and forces to come together uh, under the canopy of creation. From heavenly harmony, this universal frame began from harmony to harmony through all the compass of the notes it ran, the diapason closing full in man. So, so you know that this is of course a very technical term, like diapason. That is a musical measure for checking the correctness of the tones of notes. Yeah, so the diapason closing full in man. So of course you know that the every diapason, of course, demonstrates the entire compass of tones in the scale, and that scale is the scale that includes the lowest tone to the highest one. So in that way, we should say that definitely uh, John Dryden was acquainted with music well, probably. Okay, so here we see that there is a turbulent condition. I mean, the opposing forces of the four opposing forces, just like the soil, the water, wind, and and let's see. But these are the four elements actually that are commanded by music to come together and to produce a unity. And that unity is a universe that we are living in. And of course, the earth is part of it. So yes, and the other one is fire. Fire, water, wind, and land or soil. So these are the four elements of the universe. Okay, so let's leap into the second stanza. What passion cannot music raise and quell? Who wants to read it? You, Fixie? Well, I can't see you on the list. Yeah, but yeah, I can see you here. Yes. I have unlocked you. Okay, yes. There. I am unlike both of your devices. Okay, if your computers do not provide any access, please let me know because I should not waste our time. The microphone is open. Right there. Okay, I myself start reading again. The
May I
second
read it,
stanza.
sir?
No, you have read it once.
Okay.
What passion cannot music raise and quell when jubile struck the chorded shell? His listening brethren stood around, and wondering on their faces fell to worship that celestial sound. Less than a god, they thought, they could not dwell within the hollow of that shell that spoke too sweetly, so sweetly and so well. What passion cannot music raise and quell? So it is about the power of music, and of course it is not just an aesthetic appraisal of music, but a kind of empirical recognition of the importance and beauty of music that can bring about changes in human, just like the like sorrows to quench, and of course good moments and sweet moments to raise. So this is actually a very beautiful stanza of the poem that may give us both a historical and an aesthetic, freight of music. So it is talking about the power of music. It says that music can raise and quell any kind of human passion. If you are happy, the music can make you happier. If you are sad, music can make you sadder, or vice versa, it can make you happy too. So it is a flexible recognition of the power of music that is able to to intensify emotions in human being. So when Jubal struck the corded shell, what is that corded shell? What is the corded shell? No ideas? Well, actually, it is a biblical allusion to the invention of Jubal, who created a musical instrument with the shell of the tortoise. So he just made a tortoise shell, into a corded musical instrument. So that shallow or hollow shell returns back to that tortoise that he killed, and he made out of his shell a musical instrument. So, however, the biblical reference actually to that is also sometimes referred to as Tubal or sometimes Jubal. It is a Hebrew name, and it is mentioned in Genesis chapter 5, verse 21 in the Old Testament. Actually, that it demonstrates how Jubal made a flute, and sometimes it was modified in the New Testament that the invention of Jubal is introduced as a string musical instrument. Okay, Victory, I will unlock you.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
You hear me well?
I do hear you well.
Thank you. Yes, about the second stanza, the first line, what passion cannot music raise and quell? This part of, or this line, deals with the human passions and the tremendous impact of music on these passions. And the music imposes order over disorder. And there is a reference to the biblical Jubal. According to the Bible, Jubal was the first musician who represented the elemental force of primitive music. And the poet himself imagines that he is with his chorded shell performing a primitive ceremony of public worship. When Jubal struck the ordered shell, here, when Jubal is the father of music, sounded the strings of his strings musical instrument and produced music, his brothers and sisters were captivated on hearing that sweet music.
Mm-hmm. So yes, the biblical allusion to the story of Jubal is absolutely the strong point of the poem. So, however, you know that it is
Yes.
a very delicate technique that John Dryden employs to make an association between the historicity of music and the beauty of music. So this is, I think, one of the greatest, I think, achievements that a very few people in the 18th century could reach. So yes, that is the biblical allusion to the study to the story of Jubal or Tubal sometimes, who created a kind of musical instrument. Just wait for some seconds. Yes, excuse me. Yes, I take it. I mean that reference to Jubal is the poetic subtlety of the song, about how artistically John Dryden succeeded to make a connection between the history, a biblical history, and the poetical use of that concept. So yes, he says that what passion cannot music raise and quell when jubilee struck the corded shell. His listening brethren stood around and wondering, on their faces fell to worship that celestial sound. He says that his religious brothers, heard that sound, and they thought that there should be a sound or a kind of music that would come from heaven. So they fell down to respect that celestial music that they would think it was entirely divine. So for him, actually, the divinity of music is equal to obedience to God, because his religious brothers were just allowed to to fall down and their faces on the ground only for God, not for something else. But this is the power of music that made them think as a voice that is coming from the words of God. To worship that celestial sound, less than a god, they thought they could not dwell within the hollow of that shell that spoke so sweetly and so well. They would say that this is the voice of God that is coming out from that hollow shell. So it should be something divine. And the divinity is so charmingly enchanting to them that they cannot stop thinking about anything else. They say that the only thing that can produce this beautiful sound or this beautiful voice actually is God. So there should be a trace of God in this hollow shell that spoke so sweetly and so well. What passion cannot music raise and quell? So actually, by quell, he means that the power of music is able to evoke or subdue emotions and passion. It is a frequent theme in the 17th century literature. So but in the stanzas 2 to 6, the poet considers music as awakening religious awe, warlike courage, sorrow for unrequited love, jealousy and fury, and the impulse to worship God. So this is again the capability of music that can give rise to all of these sometimes contradictory feelings and emotions. Love, war, sorrow, grief, beauty, happiness, sadness, and all of these are the passions, as Dryden calls it, that can be evoked by the power of music. So, yes, and that is the second stanza. So other stanzas, from stanza 3 onwards, are shorter than this one. Let's go, for this stanza 3. Yes, Mr. Glassman, I unlock you.
Hello, sir. Have you got my voice?
Hello, yes.
May I start with the third stanza?
Yes.
Of course. The trumpet's loud clangor excites us to arms with shrill notes of anger and mortal alarms. The double, double, double beat of the thundering drum cries hard, can foes come? Charge, charge, 'tis too late to retreat. Well, in the third stanza, the most eye-catching and important part the poet is trying to discuss is the sound of trumpet. Well, as we know, this has got a louder sound than almost all the other musical instruments, and it reminds us, the poet reminds us that it makes us excitement, and it makes the listener so excited, as it says in the second verse, excites us to arms. It means it brings up feelings inside the listener of the audience and so forth. And also it reminds, the sound of the trumpet reminds the listener of the anger, as the sound is so heavy. And of course it might remind us of as a type of army music, march of the music. Therefore, in some lines further, it would say that hearts the foes come. It reminds as if the picture of a group of enemies coming toward the poet. Mm-hmm. And in the last line it says that charge, 'tis too late to retreat. Of course, in this third stanza, it revolves around the musical instruments. Actually, their sounds heighten the mood of the poem. So the only difference we might found in this stanza from the others is the heaviness of the beats and the sounds, and the negative side of the poem. As we might have some sorts of anger in this, out of the feelings in this stanza. And that's it.
Okay, yes, and you know that the poetical conventions that Dryden employed in this poem would all be relevant to the musical terms and musical instruments. So here, the first part of the series reproducing of these images, of course, is dedicated to the sound of the trumpet. And the trumpet, of course, you know, is a musical instrument that is used or was used in the former periods in wars in order to valorize the soldiers, in order to make them more courageous. So this is a canonical image that should show how the sound of the music, of the instrument, can imply a particular feeling or a particular semiotic realization. So by the name of trumpet and of course the sound of trumpet, we unconsciously remind of war. We think about war, about anger, about killing, about, as he calls it, and mortal alarm. Mortal alarms refer to the alarms that may demonstrate that at the same time both parties engaged in a war can be killed. So that is a very relevant, actually, imaginary that he puts in these lines to show that how the semiotics of an instrument can relate the meaning behind them. So that is the beautiful, I think, side of the work. So, however, it is a kind of alliteration or consonance in the part. Just read it a bit aloud. Just thinking about the accents, or what we call the intonations, like the trumpets, loud clangor. You see that all of these words are so cacophonous that they may remind us of the harshness and violence of the battlefield. The trumpets just sound te, le, ge, re. All of these are the sounds that may, may imply the signification of war and battlefield and violence. The trumpet's loud clangor excites us to arms. With shrill notes of anger and mortal alarms, the double beat of the thundering drum cries hard, the foes come. Charge, charge, 'tis too late to retreat. You see that how this cacophony, of course, reproduces the resonance of war, and of course the clangor of swords, and the sounds of war instruments. Hark, the foes come, charge, charge. Charge means, what does it mean? Charge here means attack. It means listen. It is too late to retract. You should not go back because the foe is already here. So you should face them. You should just be courageous enough to fight bravely. Okay, paragraph 4 or stanza 4. So here, this is the turn. It is flute's turn. So the flute is going to give us a very different sentimentality that may, make us devoid of that violence of the trumpet. The soft complaining flute in dying notes discovers the woes of hopeless lovers, whose dirge is whispered by the warbling flute, warbling lute. So you see that the tone and of course the euphony of this stanza is not comparable actually in terms of the impression on the reader with the previous stanza. It's about flute. You know that flute, semiotically and symbolically, is always recognized as a very soft and very mellifluous musical instrument that demonstrates the complaint of love, the reality of sorrow, of love, and of course the pain of affection. The soft complaining flute in dying notes discovers. What does it mean, the dying notes? The dying note, of course, may refer to the counter crescendo, capability of the flute that can create a sound that just comes from the highest tone to the lowest tone. It's just like a fall or gradual decline from the highest tones to the lowest tones. And this is again, I think the evidence for the Dryden's acquaintance with music, actually, because he knows how a crescendo is produced and how the counter crescendo is also provided by the act of playing. So, in Dying Notes discovers the woes of hopeless lovers whose dirge is whispered by the warbling lute. So it's about the flute. The flute is always associated with lovers, with sorrow, with grief, with separation and love in general. It is the flute that discovers the woes of hopeless lovers. So the flute is acquainted with the sorrow, with the depth of the grief of the lovers, and they are the lovers whose sorrow is represented and just produced and reproduced by the mellifluous sound, or just warbling sound of the lute. Okay, so and then he comes to the violin, and it is the fifth. So what is the violin for him? Sharp violins proclaim the jealous pangs and desperation, fury, frantic indignation, depth of pains, and height of passion for the fair, disdainful game. So here it is, I think, a middle way that Dryden is taking, and that is putting the violin in a position between a soft flute and the rest of the musical instruments, because the violin is not as harsh as a trumpet, and of course it is very soft, but not as soft as the flute. So that is a comparison between these three, actually, among these three, between the flute and trumpet with the violin. Yes. So actually here, sharp violins is a reference to the bright tone of the modern violin introduced into England after the Restoration. So the Restoration period is a period, as I said, of many innovations and changes in English society. And one of these developments and actually innovations was the introducing of the violin into the English society. So this is quite timely realization of the position of the violin in the context of musical world of England. So, what does he mean by this? Who wants to read it? Yes, the fifth. Let's see how Muhammad. Oh, Muhammad Hassan. I've unlocked you. So this is again a kind of complaint that the poet is offering here, that the sound of violin, or the sound or the voice of music that comes out from the body of the violin is the representation of the pains. I mean the torturous pains that that lovers tolerate, and the way that they are disappointed by the lovers or by the beloved. So it is about also about fury, and of course vexation, and anger. I mean, the maddening anger. So the depth of it shows also the depth of the pain, and also the depth or the height of passion and sentiment of the lover, because it is actually it is in the sound of the violin that the humiliation that lovers apply to the that beloved apply to the lovers is represented. So this is about the sadness of love, or we can say it in a better way, it's the sadness of loving women who do not, respect the lovers, the beautiful women who do not respect the lovers. Okay, so let's go on uh, with the rest of the poem. Six. But oh, what art can teach, what human voice can reach. The sacred organ's praise, notes inspiring holy love, notes that wing the heavenly ways to mend the chorus, chorus above. What does it mean? Yes, just thinking about this, I mean, to include the meaning and the significance of choir in the context of the poem. Okay, so go on if you want.
May I, sir?
Yes.
Well, as we have witnessed in previous stanzas, the speaker, the poet has just talked about different instruments and the qualities they might have. But in this stanza, it refers to human being, focuses on the Saint Cecilia's musical instrument, the organ, as it refers. According to what I have understood, the poet wants to denote that the human voice cannot reach the sacred organ's praise. Nobody can teach this art to human being. I mean, it is it is a talent. Let's say it might be something given to human being as a divine inspiration. So it might be heavenly. It might be denoted as heavenly thing given to human being. Well, the reference is to Saint Cecilia's organ, who was inspired by heaven, in fact.
Mm-hmm. So actually, the significance of this stanza lies in its historical maybe account, because we know that the invention of the organ that is used in the churches actually is attributed to the attempts of Saint Cecilia herself. And in the history of music, Saint Cecilia was responsible for inventing the organ, and this is why the organ is that much sacred and of course celestial in tone and of course in sound, and it is employed in churches to intensify the spiritual load of the atmosphere. So yes, and oh, but what art can teach, what human voice can reach, the sacred organ's praise. It says the only instrument that can show us the spirituality of Saint Cecilia is the organ and nothing else. Notes inspiring holy love. So the notes that the organ produces are the holy ones, the holy notes that have been inspired by God. Notes that wing their heavenly ways to mend the choirs above. So this is actually again a kind of extolling or praising the function or the musical beauty of the organ, because it says that it is the voice or the sound that the organ produces goes beyond the borders of the earth. It reaches it reaches the sky. It reaches heaven. So it is celestial. It is a celestial sound that tries to reach the voice of human being to God. It is like a medium that stands in cooperation with human, spirituality and the divinity of God. Okay, and the last stanza. Who wants to read it?
Sir, I have a question before you go to the next stanza. May I ask?
Mhm.
About the fifth stanza that it speaks about actually about the whole poem, but especially the sixth and fourth stanza. It came to my mind this popular poem of مولانا بشنو از نیشان حکایت میکند. Does it have a relation? I mean, is there any historical background here, or it has no relation with each other?
Well, it can be, of course, in a post-structuralist reading. There should be some intertextual and interconceptual connections between the two poems. But historically, we have no evidence that John Dryden could read Persian at all. And I am totally sure that he knew nothing about Persian language and Persian literature. So he was absolutely unaware of such a poem. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. But I think it can be a beautiful connection if there is a study, I don't know, or
Yes, there could be. I mean, well, if you want to conduct a research in this, from this point of view, you should think about intertextuality and, of course, maybe the historical readings of both periods. I mean, Maulana's period and Dryden's. Yeah, it can be a research. Yes. Okay. Let's see if. But I have unlocked Mohammed many times, but I don't know what's wrong with computer. Okay, so let's see if somebody else is willing to discuss this final stanza of the poem.
May I continue, sir?
Well, let's see if Fikri, are you going to say something? Okay, so let's give the turn to Fikri, and then you can speak if you want.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, what happened to you, Fikri?